Have you ever seen yourself in a new mirror and found that you look different in it than in the one at home? And have you then asked yourself if maybe this is how you actually look? I have that experience with the mirror at my massage therapist's place. I always feel like I'm looking much better in it than in reality. Or is that the reality of how I look? And then it dawned on me that probably no one can ever know what they truly look like. Because cameras distort, the surface of the water is never clear. Even mirrors can have slight bends and shadows in them, and light always hits differently. There is just no way to look at our own face without a detour through glass and silver foil. And on top of that, your brain renders you totally blind for about 2 hours each day to spare you an intense motion sickness. And it fills those moments of blindness with a bunch of educated guesses. That basically means that part of your perceived reality is actually totally made up, albeit well done. If you want to know more about this phenomenon known as saccadic suppression, I recommend you watch the video from Kurzgesagt on that topic. It's totally worth it. Now, our face is just one of many things we might never truly see though. Another thing that might be forever hidden behind distortion and straight out lies is our true self. The origin of all the reflections in a hall of mirrors that is our identity, reflecting our numerous false selves and the selves of others that we might mistake for our own. Acknowledging that we are living a myriad of false selves is, in my opinion, a crucial part of personal growth. Because even if we are still able to somehow move forward in life without us confronting who we are and, most importantly, who we are not, we might do so in a totally wrong direction. You have most likely heard the phrase to live on autopilot, a state that more and more people find themselves trapped in, facilitated through gadgets that pull our attention outward, an excess of online content that kills boredom instantly, personality cults, and a growing individualism. And some people like it on the backseat. It's comfortable, it's easy, and it doesn't force you to read Carl Jung. But even the most distracted among us will occasionally feel the painful dissonance that comes from living a life of seemingly blissful ignorance. Because ignorance will eventually fail to hide the truth that lies beneath your layers of unobserved complexes and self-preservation mechanisms. And you better be equipped for such rude awakening. If we want to avoid a life on autopilot, stop mistaking our reflections for reality, form more meaningful relationships, and stop outsourcing our life to circumstance, we have to turn on the light in this hall of mirrors to start seeing the false selves for what they are. And this metaphorical light is your awareness. Awareness is more than just consciousness. It's consciousness with context, trying to actually interpret what it sees. It's the capacity to observe an experience without immediately reacting to it. There are lots of different kinds of awareness. There are your standards like self-awareness, social awareness, situational awareness, somatic awareness, behavioral awareness, and ethical awareness. But there are some more advanced ones as well, like the relational awareness of what is happening between you and someone else, the spiritual awareness of something higher than yourself, and meta-awareness, meaning the awareness of being aware. Awareness can either grow slowly through curiosity, philosophy, love, or even art. It can be systematically facilitated through therapy and mindfulness, or it can come upon us in an instant. One very strong catalyst for instant awareness, and one that I personally believe is sadly the most common one of all, is trauma. One of my earliest memories from when I was 3 years old was a traumatic one, and it sadly was just one of many that would follow. I didn't know it back then, but I'm sure today that it was exactly those threatening experiences that equipped me with incredibly high empathy and the ability to deeply reflect on myself and others. Because when you are confronted with fear, you have to wake up. It's not an option anymore to become aware of yourself and the world around you, because your immediate survival could depend on you understanding the situation you're in. This kind of survival mode sensitivity sharpens your perception, but unfortunately rarely in a neutral way. It teaches you to scan for danger and read between the lines. You become hyper-aware, yes, but also hyper-vigilant. And mind you, trauma doesn't necessarily mean a split-second shock. Trauma can creep in slowly just as well. For example, through seemingly harmless things like prolonged neglect from caregivers, or continuous gaslighting by a less than ideal romantic partner. No matter how acquired though, awareness is not an on and off thing. Even though I'm using the metaphor of a light being switched on. You don't actually go from 0 to 100. But instead, awareness comes gradually. And thus will, especially in your younger years, always be a little clouded. Now, the job of awareness is to find the original at the center of your hall of mirrors. But to simply be aware is not enough here, as it doesn't necessarily mean that you see without distortion, just as you might not see your true face just because you look into a mirror. And it's not an easy task to sift through all the distortions, because especially if your awareness comes through trauma, that trauma might have brought something else with it, and that is a false self. What often happens when we go through any kind of suffering is that we are building what British psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott calls called a false self in order to protect our true self. And that's tragic because when the true self gets buried under years of performing, people pleasing and protecting, you miss out on your own uniqueness and others are missing out on it too. So let's not miss out on you and let's try to unbury the authenticity. When you begin to observe yourself, you will realize that your identity is a series of bouncing images of how you see yourself, how others see you, how you want to be seen, and how you think others see you. That's quite overwhelming and confusing. And it doesn't make it easier that these false selves were shaped by many different factors, like your family, your school, your country, your traumas of course, your mentors, and your social class. So chipping away at this is tedious, especially as some of it might actually be you after all. So to be truly self-aware is also very much about being aware of others, of systems, of language, of context, of culture, because your own self doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is a product of you in correlation to the world around you. And thus introspection is just helpful if alternated with extrospection. And to make it even more complicated, you can't just look at the present for answers, but you have to especially dig deep into your past as well, as most false selves have been born in your younger years. If you have ever indulged in psychotherapy, you will have noticed by now that almost every major trait we possess can be traced back to our childhood. At some point in our journey of introspection, it becomes quite automatic to search for answers to our own behavior in our early development, and especially in our memory to our closest caregivers. Your parents are not always the culprit, but often. Because in order to ensure our survival in the beginning of our life, our brain is forcing us to imitate through a phenomenon called mirroring. Our brains are biologically wired to mirror others through a system of mirror neurons, which are activated both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else performing it. In other words, we simulate another person's behavior, patterns, and emotions in our brains to understand them. And that happens unconsciously on a biological level, which makes it so hard to spot. Mirroring is an integral part of human development that helps us fit in with social groups and build emotional rapport with others. It's a core mechanism behind empathy and social bonding, and for small children it is crucial to learn basic social standards. But unconscious and compulsive mirroring has the potential to eradicate your authentic self. And because mirroring is not something that will or even should go away, it needs to be taken by the hand and guided thoughtfully in order to do more good than harm. Just as mirroring shapes you involuntarily by early caregivers and random encounters you might would have loved to avoid, you can be shaped consciously by the people you intentionally choose to surround yourself with. If you hang out with people that drink a lot, chances are that you will have a lot of hangovers to deal with yourself. But if you instead bring cookies to the literature club, you will become more literate. You can't separate your mind from the minds around you completely, so you might want to choose from whom to mirror wisely. But how do we know that we chose wisely? Well, your body often speaks first. For example, through anxiety, unease, or even guilt. And those feelings are often a first sign that you follow a bad mentor. If someone demands loyalty but offers no accountability, it's not guidance, it's control. If someone expects you to copy them instead of becoming yourself, it's not teaching, it's imprinting. If someone's presence drains your energy and clouds your clarity, it's not inspiration, it's distortion. If someone punishes questioning instead of welcoming it, it's not leadership, it's authoritarianism. And if someone's wisdom always serves their ego more than your path, it's not mentorship, it's manipulation wrapped in charisma. Awareness is the only way to take back the steering wheel, because you have to first recognize something before you can actively address it. And there's a lot to unpack here, and spoiler alert, this unpacking can take a lifetime and might not even be finished by the end of it. But it doesn't have to be, and as long as you continue to listen and reflect, and as long as you don't let your persona go completely rampant, you are well on your way to slowly uncover your true self. You probably already heard the saying that what triggers you about someone else often says more about you than it does about them. This is not just an empty remark, but actually a psychological defense mechanism known as projection. And it can give you clues about your true self if you learn how to spot and especially how to read it. Projection is just one thing to guide us in our quest for self-discovery though. There are many other ways to uncover our true self, like introspection through boring things like journaling and meditation, or even more boring things like straight-out solitude, or through our relationships. Because how we behave in our intimate relationships is often a mirror of our childhood experiences. Think attachment styles. Or how about some spiritual practice or philosophy? The distancing from a personal history that comes from contemplating old wisdom can offer a deeper perspective on your patterns. Your dreams too are informative, if also somewhat dubious way of learning about yourself. Take them with a grain of salt, but still take them, and that may be in the presence of Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. I personally wouldn't give too much about trendy dream interpretations, but recurring themes can certainly hint at repressed feelings and fears. I personally get abandoned in my dreams all the time, but let's not talk about that. If dreams explore the hidden, pressure reveals the raw. Most people drop all their masks when they are scared or exhausted or taken by surprise in any way. It's quite revealing, and if you are aware enough already, you might be able to spot your own spontaneous reactions. And lastly, there's creative expression. When you create, whether you write, paint, sing, or dance, you bypass the rational and thinking mind and enter your feeling mind that is much more authentic. The styles you choose, your themes, your obsessions, all of that is a map to your own psyche. All of these avenues are revealing and interesting, but none of them will ever lead to an instant understanding of who you are. Awareness needs to be cultivated through observation without judgment, through the practice of empathy and through genuine curiosity. And furthermore, next to the continuous effort it requires to uncover yourself, even your most true self is not permanent. You are the sum of every place, person, and pain you have ever passed through. And all of these things might become a part of the true you along the way. And while some of these experiences might be unwanted and hindering, and objectively need to be overcome and unlearned, others might be a welcomed new you. For example, when internalizing the teachings of a good mentor. And if we look at Carl Jung's self with a capital S, then yourself is not just your discoverable ego anyway, but also your unconscious and unknown parts that need to be integrated instead of removed. Thus, yourself is not a thing at all, but a process. And the knowledge of it is born in the feedback loops between you and the world. A feedback loop that goes back and forth through several layers. The first being the awareness of your emotions, habits, and thoughts as they come. The second being the awareness of the context of them, meaning why these patterns exist and where they came from. And the third one being the awareness of how your story intersects with the stories of others, and how meaning is never yours alone. And now this combination of becoming aware, of internalizing, of overcoming, and of integrating is called individuation. Individuation, according to Carl Jung, is the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are. It's not about becoming someone new, but rather about uncovering and integrating the many fragmented parts of yourself. The conscious and the unconscious, the shadow and the persona, the inner child and the adult, the rational mind and the intuitive soul. It's a movement toward wholeness, where your actions, values, and desires begin to align not with external expectations, but with your inner truth. Now, do not confuse individuation with individualism though. Individualism emphasizes independence and self-interest, and that often in contrast to the collective, which in my opinion is not exactly a considered way of going about life. Individuation, on the other hand, is about integration, about becoming a whole person by acknowledging your inner contradictions and your place within a greater web of relationships. It's not about standing apart, but about becoming authentic in harmony with the collective. And it's not a joyful ride most of the time. It gets uncomfortable, because in order to see yourself fully, you can't just look at the good. You also have to pay attention to the bad and the ugly, which involves a lot of humility and confrontation. And I don't mean the kind of confrontation with your intrusive neighbors that can be resolved quickly with a sober cease and desist taped to their door. I'm talking about internal confrontation, the one where you can never truly win an argument because you would also be the loser in both cases. The path toward individuation is guided by the self with a capital S, but needs to constantly be supported by noticing your masks, recognizing your patterns, confronting your repressed traits, and by observing the world and your place in it. And it's not something you can do alone. You don't know how kind or reactive you are until you are in conflict, and you don't know how honest you are until someone calls you out. So to recap, awareness and introspection make you see who you are, and individuation is the process of either fully embracing or improving that. It's not necessarily about changing yourself, but about embracing it. To uncover the original, give it a hug and say, "You're looking great today." But now, do we actually have to know ourselves? Well, except for dying, we don't have to do anything. But not knowing comes at a great cost. Some have spent so long building mirrors, they have forgotten there's a face behind the reflection. Especially in narcissists, defenses can become so strong that awareness becomes nearly impossible. They see the world not as it is, but as they must see it to protect their story. The danger of never looking inward is not just to become ignorant though. It's a straight-out alienation from your own life. This kind of living where you identify with a constructed self-image instead of your real one. Now now crosses into the territory of self-perception though. And that is such an important topic that it deserves its own video right after this one. Now, turning a blind eye to your false selves, no matter if out of inability or unwillingness, can make you feel deeply dissatisfied even with a seemingly successful life. Because that life was built by the false self. What can creep in here is emotional numbness and a quiet anxiety. You repeat painful cycles, get caught in shallow relationships, and fall victim to stagnation, inner conflict, and fragmentation. And finally, you might be doomed to become a caricature of your false selves, ruled by the shadow. When awareness is missing, life becomes a script you didn't write, acted out by a self you never questioned, chasing things you don't really want. And you might never find out who you could have become. But as always, balance. Self-awareness has the potential to turn into self-obsession. Hyperfixation on your own psychology can become narcissism. And excessive introspection and evaluation can quickly lead to overthinking. And while you certainly should think about yourself and your actions every now and then to avoid egocentrism, you should not overthink it at the same time. I know, being human is complicated. The task of a lifetime is to bring consciousness to the complexes that govern us, so we are not unconsciously ruled by them. Not to become someone, but to become ourselves. If you've ever felt like you're wearing a mask or you're living a life that doesn't quite fit, that might be the first flicker of awareness. Don't ignore it. Pay attention to the shape you keep returning to when no one is looking, the colors you choose without thinking, and the things you would do even if nobody paid you. Because all that is closer to the origin than anything else. Yes, awareness costs something. It costs your comfort, your illusions, and the autopilot you have been clinging to. It won't make your life easier, but it will make it yours. And to me, that's a trade worth making. And it's not about being perfect, and you don't even have to be ready for it. What matters is that you remain open. Open to noticing, to learning, to meeting yourself again and again with total honesty and a little bit of grace. Because at the end of the day, the only real requirement is, as always, to stay curious. Thanks for watching. Fun fact on the side, I tried to become an aeronaut in the past. Let me know in the comments if you have any experience with that. Yes, water. We can do better than this.